now and don't worry about the time.
I respectfully disagree with this point of view. I think,
what are you rocking today? What do you got?
I'm rocking some shoes.
This is a great shoe. This is a great shoe.
We want to show the full screen of the leaders in the White House wearing their abominations.
That's a fantastic shoe.
This is poorly shod. So there we go.
I'm not a monk strap guy, but that's a great shoe.
Everybody's wearing these things, for God's sake.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, one thing I do love about the caucus, it's nice bipartisanship here. One thing they can agree on, and the caucus put out...
Institutionalist speaks.
Absolutely. They put out a very important statement today, which was that sneakers and statesmanship are compatible. So,
is that a convincing argument? Does that resonate with the people that they're trying to appeal to?
It definitely can, because a lot of people feel that way. But at the same time, I think what's missing here is a conversation about earning your way to forgiveness. President Obama, for example, talked about public service loan forgiveness. You go serve the country, you can earn your way to forgiveness.
I mean, that's essentially what's at the heart of the Republican argument, as we just heard, right?
Well, yeah, personal responsibility, I think, is central to that. Now, at the same time, to your point, student loan crisis is huge in this country. It's a drag on all Americans because young people are buying cars later, they're purchasing homes later. That impacts everyone. So we do need to do something, but I think there's a smart way to do this. By the way, not talked about in this is the legislative process is supposed to function through Congress. What Biden tried to do with this measure last year was to do it through executive order, and this is the problem. You get stuck in the courts.
You are such an institutionalist.
I am. I believe in Article 1. Congress should do its job, and you can't legislate through the executive branch.
Okay.
Well, I would say empathy is one of the scarcest resources we have in politics right now, and I think we need that more across the aisle. Now, mentioning the gun violence bill that passed through Congress last year, that no one thought that was going to happen. That was a major bipartisan victory dealing with red flag laws across the country. A couple years prior to that, my organization was involved in the authorization for the CDC to study gun violence as a public health issue. So things are possible, but I would agree a lot more can be done at the state level. One huge opportunity is gun licensing. If you need to have a license to drive a car, you should have a license to carry a firearm.
You know, Rebecca.
Well, first of all, great to hear that we have a congresswoman who wants to read the bill before voting on it. Believe it or not, and this might be news to a lot of people at home, that often does not happen. But the second thing, and as the congresswoman highlighted, crisis negotiations is not a time to be setting fiscal policy. What's really going on here is Congress has not passed a budget in over a generation.
Yeah.
And so now we're in the situation where we're trying to tweak things just so we could not default.
Yeah.
But what we really need to do is make sure we're not defaulting and then have a rational conversation.
Right, yeah.
Needs to be done.
Well, I think, background checks are helpful, and the issue that's underneath your question now is why can the 90% issue actually pass through Congress? And that gets at structural issues that don't get talked about. You have to talk about our closed primary system in many of our states. You have to talk about money in politics. You have to talk about the structural reasons why there's real partisan polarization on this if you want to understand why there's not more action on gun violence. Well, and he's been seen as having a weakness around retail politics. Right. So the first debate will be in Milwaukee. I'm inviting Governor DeSantis to have a beer with me. This is my town.
There you go.
Let's do it.
All right.
And let's see what happens. Well, and this issue could combust, no pun intended, into a larger issue like we saw with the light bulbs issue. And the substance of this is about energy efficiency. Of course, it becomes about something other than that. The other point I'll just point to here is there are a lot of industry groups that are involved in lobbying for this issue and lobbying against it as well. Wouldn't it be nice to have a political system where they couldn't lobby in a way that's legally bribing members of Congress? They're donating money directly to members of Congress, and we're not having a real honest conversation. So we'll see. Chief, this is Stephen Olikara. I think you're exactly right about the hyper-partisan nature of our politics, and we don't see opportunities to agree like we do have on banning chokeholds, for example. But do you also see an opportunity on supporting and upgrading police training to help to train police officers in de-escalating violence? Is that another bipartisan opportunity that you see?
It really is, and I'm glad you brought that up because we tend to put things as an either or when it's really a both and. And, you know, unfortunately, looking at the George Floyd incident, you can't train a depraved heart. And the officer, in the callous way that he handled George Floyd, that ultimately led to his death, I don't know if training would have addressed that. But for the officers that were observing, training and policy very well could have had them intervene. So you're absolutely right in bringing that up.
If Ron DeSantis is running the same lane, essentially, as Donald Trump, he's going to get steamrolled. Trump is well-versed in the art of political combat, so DeSantis has to carve out a different lane. And to Kerry's point, we didn't hear him really articulate that last night. And the funniest thing is Elon was extolling the virtues of speaking in an unscripted fashion, only for DeSantis to go in and talk in a scripted speech. Elizabeth, I think it's no longer about wearing tinfoil hats because, as we saw during the pandemic, the Department of Defense has confirmed UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. And I think it got swept under the rug a bit because we had other news going on like the pandemic. But this is a fascinating issue that's quickly changing. And I think there's now more interest on Capitol Hill to potentially dedicate resources towards the DOD to investigate this.
Without a doubt.
Your sense as well?
Yeah. Without a doubt. They're taking this much more seriously.
It could be a catastrophe, but I think most people are assuming, like we have before, both sides will come together and reach an agreement in the 11th hour. If we don't reach an agreement, there could be real impacts. You know, look at what happened. The last time we had a similar situation like this was President Obama in the White House. Republicans took over the House. You have John Boehner. And the result of that was we did have a credit downgrade, and the market crashed a bit after that. So that has a real impact on people. Worth also mentioning in this whole negotiation here, I think a lot of people, like the congressman mentioned, theatrics, right?
Yeah.
What the theatrics are geared towards are the narrow slice of primary voters and activists that these politicians are responding to, not what I call the exhausted majority, which is everyone at home.
The whole thing.
We need to regulate algorithms here. I mean, we need to look at this in the same way that we look at tobacco, alcohol. We have laws in place that restrict the ability of kids to consume alcohol. We need laws in place to restrict the ability to consume some of these algorithms. And the predatory algorithms that we see from these social media companies is extremely, extremely alarming. And by the way, we keep talking about kids. I don't think the adults have this figured out either. I think that adults, you know, when they see something on Facebook, they take that as a fact because they're used to things being written as fact, but we got to change. This is obviously deliciously rich, but what I will say is every time you hear MTG, I'm going to look at the camera here, how many bills has she passed? That's a question everyone at home should ask.
What is the number 0?
It's pretty close to 0. How does this conversation translate on the ground? So take suburban Milwaukee, for example. This is an area that used to be Scott Walker, Paul Ryan type territory that voted for Trump. They held their nose and voted for Trump in 2016, and then they started peeling off and they voted for Biden increasingly in 2020. So the real question is for DeSantis, is he appealing to that MAGA base, or is he trying to build a wider coalition? And right now, I think he's been appealing too much to the party elites and the donor class as opposed to people who are actually on the ground.